In the pantheon of Leeds United folk heroes, few names ignite the same raw emotion as Alan Smith. To some, he is the ultimate Judas, the boy who kissed the badge, wept on the pitch after relegation, and then walked straight into the arms of Manchester United. To others, and there are more of us than the loudest voices would have you believe, he is the last true Yorkshire Terrier, fierce, loyal to a fault, and ultimately the victim of a club that crumbled beneath him rather than a player who abandoned it. Smith was born in Rothwell, 10 miles from Elland Road, in October 1980. Leeds wasn't just his club, it was his postcode, his accent, his identity. When he stepped off the bench at Anfield on the 14th of November 1998 and smashed home a volley with his first touch in professional football, 3 minutes after coming on, something shifted in the soul of every Leeds supporter. Here was one of us, not a mercenary from overseas, not a London lad lured north by Peter Ridsdale's checkbook, but a local kid with dirt under his fingernails and white in his blood. He was 18 and fearless. The following years were a fever dream. Champions League nights under the floodlights, Valencia, Deportivo, Lazio, the semi-final against Valencia, when he was sent off for a lunge born of pure desperation. That red card still hurts, because it felt like the moment the dream cracked. But Smith never hid. He wore the disappointment like a second skin, the same way he wore the number 17 shirt that became synonymous with long bursting runs and full-throated commitment. By 2001, he had won the club's Player of the Year award twice in succession, the first player in Leeds history to do so. Think about that for a second. Harry Kewell glittered, Mark Viduka bullied, Rio Ferdinand oozed class, but the supporters looked at Smith, 19, 20 years old, and saw themselves. He wasn't the most skillful. He didn't have Kewell's silk or Viduka's ice-cold finishing. What he had was heart the size of Headingley. And then the money ran out. The collapse of Leeds United between 2001 and 2004, one of the great tragedies in English football. Ridsdale's live the dream mantra turned into a nightmare of debt, fire sales, and broken promises. Players who had been bought for fortunes were shipped out for pennies. Ferdinand to Manchester United, Woodgate to Newcastle, Kewell to Liverpool. The club was hemorrhaging £80 million and sinking fast. Alan Smith could have left in 2002. He could have left in 2003. Manchester United made their interest clear long before the final whistle of the 2003-04 season. Arsenal, too. Yet he stayed. He stayed when the Champions League became the UEFA Cup, when the UEFA Cup became the Championship, when the team photo looked nothing like the one that had graced the cover of magazines 3 years earlier. He stayed until there was literally nothing left to stay for. On the 16th of May 2004, Leeds played their final Premier League game for what would turn out to be 16 years. Charlton Athletic beat them 4-1 at Elland Road. When the whistle went, Smith sank to his knees in the centre circle, kissed the badge, and cried. Not polite tears proper, shoulder-heaving sobs. Grown men in the stands cried with him. That image is burned into the retina of every Leeds fan who was there. It wasn't acting. It was a boy from Rothwell realising the club he loved had died in front of him. 3 months later, he signed for Manchester United. The backlash was immediate and ferocious. Judas, mercenary, money grabber. The fact that Leeds had publicly listed him for sale, that they were £100 million in debt, that they needed every single penny of the £7 million fee you must to pay the wages that month, none of that mattered. The fact that Smith waived a slice of his own transfer fee to ease the burden on the club he was leaving again, none of it mattered. The narrative was set in stone. He had betrayed Leeds. But look closer. He didn't agitate for a move. He didn't hand in a transfer request. He didn't court the press. When Leeds told him they had accepted an offer from Manchester United and only Manchester United were willing to pay the money up front, which the administrators desperately needed, he asked if there was any way he could stay. The answer was no. The club he loved no longer had the means to employ him. So he went, and in doing so, he carried the scars of Elland Road with him for the rest of his career. At Old Trafford, He scored on his competitive debut a peach of a volley in the Community Shield. He scored another stunner against Norwich. Sir Alex Ferguson was something of a young Roy Keane in him and moved him into midfield. For a brief, shining moment, it looked as though Smith might become the long-term successor to the captain who had defined United for a decade. Then came the 18th of February, 2006, an FA Cup tie at Anfield full circle. Cruelly, John Henry's lines up a free kick. Smith throws himself in front of it. The ball ricochets off his leg. His ankle collapses beneath him, and the stadium falls silent. Ferguson later called it the worst injury he had ever seen on a football pitch. 6 months out, maybe longer. Some whispered he might never play again. He did play again. Of course he did, because that's what Yorkshire Terriers do, they bite back. He returned for the 2006-7 run-in, scored in the 7-1 demolition of Roma, and was awarded a Premier League medal even though he fell 1 game short of the required appearances. The league made an exception. They don't do that for mercenaries. When Newcastle came calling in 2007, he left United without a fuss. At St James Park he captained the side through another relegation, another promotion, another fight. He played through pain, through boos from his own city when he faced Leeds in a pre-season friendly, through the slow erosion of a body that had given everything it had got by the time he dropped into League One with MK Dons, and then League Two with Notts County. The goals had dried up, and the headlines had long since moved on, but the fight never left him. He coached kids, he played centre-back when asked, he took caretaker charge when the manager walked out. Even at 36, he was still scrapping, and Leeds fans, the relationship has thawed. Time is a great healer, and perspective is its accomplice. When Smith returned to Elland Road as a pundit, the reception was warm. When he speaks now, his voice still cracks at the mention of those relegation tears. He never stopped loving the club. He just wasn't allowed to stay. The modern game is full of players who declare undying love 1 minute and force moves the next. Smith did the opposite. He begged to stay when everyone else was jumping ship. And when he was finally pushed out of the only club he had ever wanted to play for, he carried that rejection like a wound that never quite healed. That's why, no matter what the loudest voices say, Alan Smith will always be a Leeds man. He wasn't the most gifted player to pull on the white shirt. He wasn't the top scorer or the flair player, but he was the beating heart of a team that flew too close to the sun. And when it came crashing down, he was the one left holding the pieces. In a sport that increasingly belongs to corporations and billionaires. Alan Smith reminds us what it used to mean to be local, to care so much it hurt, to kiss the badge and mean it. He was, and always will be, the last true Yorkshire Terrier. And one day, when the noise has finally died down, Elland Road will sing his name again. Because some loyalties run deeper than transfer fees, deeper than rivalry, deeper even than time itself.